I guess
that's the way I like it. That makes me rumble. Don't we rumble? Float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Ah, rumble, young man, rumble. Hey, that's what we're going to do. We're going to rumble.
This week on Fight Stuff.
A journeyman MMA fighter finds a way to lose twice in the same fight. Bellator Europe 2 over-delivers with a trio of highlight finishes, including upkicks, a rare gogoplata, and plenty of spinning shit. Plus, we take a deep dive into the role of fighting in hockey in this week's Show and Tell. Oh,
yeah, so about 10
man.
seconds in, that's a wrap. Oh, no, not great for that guy.
That is
celebrating.
a big right hand and a quick follow-up.
Yeah, in the background, you'll see this fighter didn't realize he was knocked out.
Oh, no.
Tries to take down the ref, who promptly...
He's still trying to work a double leg, and of course the ref looks like he's sinking in a guillotine.
High
and
elbow.
he's
Switching to that Marcelo team. He's gone.
Woo! And look at it. He's smiling. That's so great.
Ruthless. Just ruthless.
That ref is so proud of himself.
Yeah, this week's viral fight clip of the week comes, we were exposed to from Renzo Gracie, the great Renzo Gracie's Instagram account. I did some digging, and basically, so it was an event in Crimea, an MMA fight from a Croatian promotion called Gladiator Dubrovnik. This event was in Yalta. It was Crimea Rush Farewell to Arms. It was called. Yeah, so these two fighters, Carlo Caput and Renat Lyadovov.
Okay.
All right. Carlo is the younger of the two and the one who seems to be the rising star. He's 7-0, and he manages to knock out this journeyman, Renat. And
that is a very, very
about
generous.
10 seconds. I mean, 34-23 is that guy's record.
Well, technically it's a winning record.
It's a winning record.
That's better than most in MMA.
I mean, that's better than most people at fighting at all. I mean, that's quite impressive.
Sure.
He's a tough guy.
No, he's definitely tough. He's durable. Or at least he was at a certain point.
Well, I feel like he's probably taken a lot of hits to the head, and those knockouts are maybe coming a little quicker these days.
Sure seems like it.
Not funny. I shouldn't laugh at that. It's just so... ugh. But anyway... Yeah, he gets knocked out in about 10 seconds with a big right hand, followed to the ground by Carlo, who's smashing on him.
Who does what Carlo is supposed to do.
Right, and the ref does what he's supposed to do, dives in there, gets him off him, like trying to protect this fighter who can't defend himself.
And then...
that guy doesn't realize he's lost and starts fighting for the double on our ref.
Right.
Who most refs do know... obviously a bit about MMA.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Most of them, like, I mean, the ones that, like, we've seen, most of them are, like, pretty high-level jiu-jitsu guys, too, because, A, they have to know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
Like, you look at, like, Herb Dean, like, he's pretty technically competent.
Yeah.
And I heard him on Rogan's podcast talking in very specific detail about the bulldog choke and things that we had talked about as well.
And why he called it, and why I totally think he made the right choice, especially when you hear him talk about it and his concern for these people and knowing... I mean, he says this thing that I think is really very, very correct, where he was like, he knows it's not even so much that he's worried about what's happening to the neck while you're resisting, but if you go out and that pressure of the bulldog keeps getting applied, once you're limping, you're not defending at all with your muscles anymore, that's like pretty scary.
Right.
Anyway, this guy...
yeah, I mean, like, you look at some of the other refs, too, are super high-level guys. Like, who was it, Mikey Beltran?
Yep.
The guy with the mustache,
the huge very
mustache.
Viking-esque braided mustache.
I mean, he's a brown belt too. I forget who he's under, but I mean, he's, you know, and besides being a big dude, like, he's just like obviously knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I think you have to at a certain point. Like, if you don't understand the ground game and you're reffing a fight,
I know.
Look out.
This ref kind of looks like he's not sinking in the choke at first, but the guy keeps fighting for the takedown.
Yep.
And then he does. And I don't know about that. I mean, like, literally a few seconds later, there's a ton of people in the cage pulling him off him and helping out. But...
well, I think it's kind of a scary proposition, though, too. If some guys, like, if you're like, okay, fight's over, and then he starts working a double leg on you out of nowhere, and you're like, hey, whoa, like, and then you sink in that guillotine, and you're just like, okay, we good? Oh, shit. No, you're still pressing me into the cage. It's like, all right, fucko. Like,
yeah, you don't know if an overhand right's going to come next.
Right,
yeah,
or if he's going to try and take you, like, elevate you, like, do all sorts of...
yeah, it's totally reflexive, just, like, finishing that choke.
Yeah.
Anyway, pretty wild. It kind of sucks getting beat twice
in one fight.
About less than 20 seconds.
So do you think that, does that place Renat at 34-25. Do we put 2 losses on there? I mean,
oh damn, that's brutal. That's pretty mean. I think that second one's an unsanctioned bout. I'm not sure how that counts.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
Anyway, that's your viral clip of the week, baby.
Welcome to the Fight Stuff podcast.
Indeed.
As always, I'm Zeke. Rodrigues Thomas.
And I'm Jared Sleeper. And here we are.
This is the podcast for everybody.
Yeah, the combat podcast for anyone who's interested in a little bit of combate.
Combate Americano or South American or anything else.
Wherever.
Yeah.
So what's this week in Sporps? Let's get into it. We're mostly going to be talking about Bellator Europe 2. I was going to say Bellator 2. There's a lot more than 2 Bellators. Bellator Europe 2 in Birmingham, England.
Which was amazing. And the only reason I knew it was happening was because of the insane posts on Instagram that were flying my way.
There were some very, very highlight reel knockouts and various finishes coming out of that. We're going to talk about 3 of them in particular. Do you want to pick which one you want to start with?
Sure. I'll just say this real quick is that, yes, technically there was a UFC fight this weekend with Cowboy Cerrone.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously normally we would spend a lot of time on that because Cowboy's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Cowboy did have a really cool comment about that fight. I saw him saying that he felt bad about it. Like he didn't want to do it. He felt like really bad going into it. He said the second round is when he had to find okay, I like to fight. I'm here to fight. I'm going to do the job. That he was just kind of surviving the first round. And I actually didn't see the fight, but I love hearing that. That's just kind of inspiring to hear.
Well, sure. I mean, also I think we've mentioned it on the podcast too that Cowboy doesn't spar anymore. And and also he's a notoriously late starter. The first round he just gets his ass beat. Mm-hmm. Historically, he has a couple first round victories, but normally he's just holy shit, I'm in a fight. You see that.
That's cool.
And to see him sort of be able to fight through that consistently, I'm just so impressed with that guy.
Hearing him talk about it was just, I think that's the neatest part. That's the part that feels applicable to just anybody who watches the sport or tunes in a little bit.
Sure, that's why I would be super interested to see him versus Conor.
Oh, yeah. I would love that fight.
That would be a very interesting fight. They would pretty much be like, hey, so no takedowns, no ground game?
Cool. These 2 lanky guys kickboxing.
Yeah.
I'd be into it. I mean, I'd love to see that fight. I don't know. Cowboys, he's just got a decent vibe to him, I feel like. And I'd also be interested to see him do that. I don't know how he would respond to the Conor thing, Conor,
the mentality, the mind games, the insults,
just the shittiness
and all that.
And stuff. I feel like Cowboy wouldn't really do it,
Yeah, I think it would be very tough to get in Cowboy's head, but you never know.
I just don't think Conor's going to fight. Maybe he will. Who knows? But I wouldn't.
Yeah.
He's so good at being a troll just with his whiskey company.
Yeah, I mean, would you come out of quote-unquote retirement to fight?
No, it's so silly.
There's so many better ways to make a living.
Yeah, he already magically... mind molded everybody to think he was the greatest in the world once. Cash out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you got beat handily by Khabib. There was no doubt. And
by what's his name? Mayweather.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever.
Well, again, he talked his way into that, too.
Yeah, he talked his way into all these fights, which is so crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about Bellator. I think the first one would be that spinning shit stuff.
Sure. Yeah, let's talk spinning shit.
Dude, Raymond Daniels versus Wilker Barros. So basically what happens is he does this amazing... First, the spinning back kick alone is dope. He does this big spinning back kick that lands pretty flush, knocks the guy truly on his ass. He doesn't go out from a liver shot or anything. There's no way that kick felt good, and it sends him bowling over. Basically, he doesn't full-on roll, but he sits his ass on the ground. But then you see Barros get up from the cage, and he uses that chance to jump on him, and he basically sets up for a big 720 kick. And, here's the quote from Daniels. He goes, I knew he was back against the cage. He had done a good job of trying to back away from my kicks, but because he was up against the cage, I knew he couldn't back up anymore. When I threw the 720, I was going to actually throw the kick, but he pushed against the cage, and it gave him more space. So I decided not to kick and came down with the right hand. And that happened all in that split second in my mind. Matrix shit.
Yeah, it was super Matrixy. With that 720 kick, I was like, oh, holy shit, he's going to land it. And just that he's so smart that in the air, he's like, oh, this guy's out of range. I'm not going to throw it.
Yeah, it's insane.
Oh, it was so amazing.
You see it, the lag time is almost enough that he wouldn't have the momentum translate to the punch, but he perfectly timed. The whole thing's just wild, and the sound is nasty. There's like a big crack, like whoo, that thing lands flush. The guy looks dead. I mean, like he's like twitching on the ground.
It's really unpleasant to watch. Like I sent it to a couple people and I was just like, okay, so there's some really impressive parts to this and there's some really scary parts to it. And the part where Barros looks like he's knocked out and he looks like he's swimming for his life is like truly scary shit.
Truly scary shit. I mean, the scariest videos I see are the ones with like coaches who don't, like in jiu-jitsu tournaments or judo tournaments, like they don't know the person's out. And there's some really nasty...
Wait, the coach, the ref. The ref. Yeah.
Where like a ref is just not calling it and you're just like, call it. What the fuck are you doing? That person's like dying on the ground because they can't tell the difference between like a twitch or reflexive, like, you know?
Sure.
Ugh. So it looks like that. But
yeah,
like,
it's really bad. And like, I just think of like the Chad George fight where he essentially called his own stoppage. Like...
Right. He's out.
He's out. He's like, no, he's not. And he's like,
he goes, yes, he is.
Look, he's out. Like, and you're just like, oh, it's just scary. Because you trust, like, listen, this is a sport fight and we're both going to go in here and we're going to try to hurt each other. And it's your job to make sure we don't die.
Yeah.
And you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
Like
scary.
that's, ugh.
But this one, yeah, it's pretty, I'm just still blown away, yes, by this new age we're living of people like Israel Adesanya, Michael Venom Page, this unbelievable, I mean, you know, Raymond Daniels, these like high level movie style kickboxing. It's mind blowing.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of some Jet Li stuff mixed with like next level athleticism. Yeah. And I'm like, it makes me wonder, I'm like, you could probably argue MMA is probably not getting the top tier athletes because the money isn't comparable to football, basketball, baseball, any of those guys. And only now is it starting to become an option for like the best of the best athletes when they see what's possible.
I mean, I think I saw something posted that was like Canelo got like 34 million for his fight.
Yeah.
And Cerrone got like 400K.
Yeah.
And it does make you go like, what?
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's super weird.
Boxing, I don't know. It kind of feels like the entertainment industry a little bit as a whole. Like
media, like linear media versus new
like
media.
This legacy stuff that exists that has established rates and a history of this union rate, you know, whatever, and this kind of a thing. And, you know, basic cable or even network TV might not get a fraction of the viewership that some new media thing does, but because the rates are in place, the standards of the industry are already there,
the ad rates are previously established, and
you get that money for it.
Yeah.
It's not that companies don't have the money to pay for the things at the lower levels. It's not like MMA or the UFC doesn't have money that they could pay people a lot.
Sure.
I mean, Conor definitely made a lot.
Sure, but Conor puts butts in seats. Like,
that's true. That's true.
That's the other thing too. And I think
that is true. Without
getting super inside baseball about like industry politics and whatnot, but like, you know, once WME bought the UFC for $4 billion, that's a huge note you got to hit every month just to service that debt. And I understand why like the agent business is not the most lucrative. It's good, but like when you have a whole bunch of venture capitalists getting into the agenting business, look out. Like you of course you got to find new ways to start making money. And I guess that's just part of the deal.
Yeah, that does seem true.
Cool.
Let's see who else.
Next? So
the other one was
spinning stuff.
Yeah, we did spinning shit. Do you want submission?
Let's
or do
Upkicks.
Yeah. Okay. Fabian Edwards beat Falco Neto with this wild upkick. It's cool because you don't see upkick finishes that often, but also because of the way he basically uses it as part of a combo to transition into hands. And that whole fight, he just proves himself as very good on the ground because you see him go like, he goes from, first you see him get taken down a few times against the cage, and he has a really impressive, almost like Sumagayashi, this like reversal, this judo reversal thing where when somebody gets a single leg on you, you know, you hook your leg kind of under their butt and flip them over with a Kimura grip. And the Kimura trap, he doesn't successfully finish basically because the cage stops him. Like there's the wall that stops him.
But you can tell he was working the
he
trap.
works it and he almost takes the back with the Kimura trap. It's like pretty impressive. And he does this first little up kick where he basically just plants like a kind of a guard thing, shoves him away on the chest, and then just stands back up with impressive athleticism. And then you see this thing a few minutes later, still in the same round, the round that he ends up winning, where he lands like a nasty up kick that I think one or two of them, 2-3 of them, the guy wobbles. He can tell he's got him a little bit shook up, and he stands right up into hands, and that's it.
Yeah. The first up kick, you were like, oh, wow. Like, he caught him with an up kick, and like, it's super impressive. And you're like, there's no way he's going to try and re-enter again when you just got rocked by an up kick. He again tries to re-enter his guard, gets smacked with the second up kick. And at that point, he's like a baby deer on ice, and then he just pops right up and finishes. I
don't think he realizes that he's as fucked up as he is in that moment. I think he's like,
you think the first up kick was like,
Yeah, well, when you see him just trying to come back in blindly, that's the same thing as that guy who gets choked out after getting knocked out.
Yeah.
He just has one thought. I'm fighting, I'm in a fight, keep moving forward.
Yeah.
You can tell that he doesn't know like how bad he's hurt.
Yeah, that's probably yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then that's
that second one. Wow.
Well, I think that would surprise. I think you'd be there and you'd be like, something just happened. I don't know what happened, but like it doesn't feel good. It's weird.
Yeah.
I actually really like that part of fighting where you see like we're such weird machines. Like if your wirings get knocked loose or whatever, it's just
what's
bizarre.
my prime directive? All right, go
it's like
kill.
last night when I fell asleep with a tank top on and somehow woke up with a t-shirt on top of my tank top this morning. I never do like sleepwalky stuff, but I was like, how the fuck did I get this t-shirt on? This is
telling
really
you, man,
weird.
You must have been cold and your body was like, prime directive, stay warm.
Put on a t-shirt. Very strange.
Nice. So that was Upkicks. And then lastly,
speaking
we
of
have the go-go.
Yeah, the good jiu-jitsu, the Kimura trap stuff that was going on in this. I think this was the main event or co-main event. I don't know, Brent Primus, which I always want to say Primus. He won this fight. Just a minute and 20 seconds into the fight, he was fighting this guy, Tim Wilde, who I guess was like a local favorite. He's the guy from the UK. Mm-hmm. And basically, Primus gets dropped. His hands were down a little bit. He eats a hand and falls down to the mat. He's chased by Wilde, takes the top position. But anyway, Primus, he said about it, yeah, man, I knew I was way, way better than him on the ground. My jiu-jitsu was awesome. I tap everyone in the gym with that gogoplata. I knew once I got him on the ground, he was in my world. So he basically gogoplatas him, which is a low percentage. You don't see it that much in jiu-jitsu. I'm sorry, in MMA. But even in jiu-jitsu, it's not super. It's becoming more common as 10th Planet gets more popular and like rubber guard styles.
Once that rubber guard and like people's mobility and flexibility are like, you're at a high enough level because it requires a fair amount of hip mobility to even set it up.
Yeah, well, I also think similar to a lot of things, I've realized a lot of jiu-jitsu stuff that looks like it's really high mobility isn't really if you're doing it right. Like if you're doing the right angles and stuff like that,
sure,
it shouldn't be. Until you learn those little details, some of those things are, people. And I think he's getting away on some sheer athleticism too. You see him really fighting for this, but you see the guy trying to defend it, doing like exactly the wrong thing, like trying to force himself back in towards it, and that's just creating exactly the pressure he needs to
finish it,
leverage into the go-go. And it's just like, but it's dope finish. And very just smooth and clean the way he realizes he's on the ground. He sees the opportunity and just goes for it, sets it up.
Feeds his leg in immediately. Like the minute Wilde tries to enter, like, essentially his guard, he just feeds that foot in there and is just sort of like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, and then from there, I was just like, to me, as I was watching it in real time, I'm just like, hey man, he's setting up a go-go. He's hey, like, and it's just like there's so many warning signs and flags that are going up, but it was just like, wow, he ignored all of them as it was getting set up, as it was locked in, as he had the hands behind his head to apply the pressure so that he was the blood choke or air choke, by the way.
That's really a little bit of both, I guess. It's more of an air choke, I would say, technically, because it's coming straight across your throat.
Yeah,
but
right?
the way that it gets set up and the way that you're really getting the pressure, I think it kind of shuts everything off if you're doing it right.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just, and taking the applicable pressure, with both hands, it was super impressive. Like, I think I've seen like 2 of them in a UFC fight 10 years ago, but like it's such a rare submission in mixed martial arts.
It's really good one to look for from the mount too. I found just like S mount or full mount. It's just you can slip that leg in there in weird ways, and then you can really put some pressure on somebody.
I was about to say that feels nasty. Just putting your shin across somebody's throat and being like, okay, I'll use the ground as my other fulcrum.
You gotta be like nice about it because it's definitely some dickhead.
It's definitely a shitty dickhead move.
Make no friends jiu-jitsu, as they say.
Nice. Well, that was this week in Sporps.
Love it. What are we doing for show and tell this week?
So show and tell, I'm rather happy with what we with what we're going to end up with, and that is the world of hockey fights.
Hell yeah! I mean, I know we talked about this like the other week, but as somebody who doesn't really watch sports in general, I do, and I know you have always liked hockey. You've always been a hockey guy. I don't know. Hockey is one of those sports. It makes the best movies.
Yep.
I think there's no bad hockey movies. There's just something about it. It's such an absurd sort of sport, especially. I mean, I grew up somewhere with snow, but it's still such an absurd sport. It's such a Canadian thing.
It is. I mean, it's definitely a Canadian Northeast thing. And, you know, growing up in Southern California, hockey was not really a thing out here. Yes, we had the Kings, and like once Gretzky came over, it was like, oh man, we finally have a shot at being like superstars. And the other thing too is like growing up in the South Bay, that's where all the Kings have lived. Like for some reason, they've all gravitated towards Hermosa, Manhattan Beach, where they live to this day. If you're on the Kings, there's a very good chance you live in Hermosa or Manhattan Beach.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like I've run into Marty McSorley.
See, these are names I don't even know.
Holy shit.
Because these are like clearly famous hockey players. This is, by the way, this has to do with the sport disparity of pay in sports also, and the weirdness of the establishment thing we were talking about before with like Cerrone and Canelo or whatever. Like, it's so bizarre that there are like, I was listening to a podcast about it, like basically why people feel like failures or not, and the weirdness of, there's like pitchers who play for the Dodgers, or I think the Angels. They're saying there's like this football player this baseball player for the Angels who makes like $500,000 a year. That's what he's on contract for, to be this pitcher. And by any stretch of the imagination, everybody would be like, that's a great, wow, $500,000 a year. Holy shit, that's a lot of money. Nobody knows who he is, for one. And two, that's compared to this guy who signs a deal for like a $400 million contract over 5 or 6 or whatever years it is, some long amount of time, but still just some insane amount of money to also be a baseball player on the same team. And there was basically,
and it's all public too. That's the other part too. Everyone knows how much you make.
Yeah.
And that's kind of weird too.
But just how weird it is to know that there's these athletes in other sports you've never even heard of making like big 6-figure salaries to play their sport.
Yeah. But I mean, that's also baseball too, where its league minimum is probably at somewhere. It's probably $500,000.
It probably is. It's probably something like that.
Exactly. Because I mean, like you look at some of the other sports, like pro soccer in the U.S., and like league minimum is like $30,000 or something like that. And you're like,
well, I would assume in some of those bigger sports leagues, ones that have the money, and I assume, I don't know if there's players unions or whatever, but I assume the standards have to do with some implicit knowledge that you can only do this for a certain amount of time.
Oh, 100%. No, and I think players associations and player unions are super important. And like, you know, as we'll talk about, the NHLPA, like the Players Association, is like a big part of hockey fighting and hockey in general. And actually,
well, explain that to me. Let me segue back, because I know I say it's how the fuck does fighting work? Why do they let them do it? Because clearly it's not a combat sport.
Right.
It's a rough sport. It's a contact sport.
It's definitely a rough sport. And it's always been sort of a intimidation has always been a factor in hockey, especially at the professional level. Now, that's obviously, like, as people are growing up, and just to finish my thought on Marty McSorley, I ran into him playing beach volleyball. And I think he had already finished playing hockey at that point. And even on the volleyball court, he was a very aggressive human being.
I believe that. Yeah.
Now it's also, unfortunately, you don't know who Marty McSorley is. He'll be featured in this segment as well. But he was one of the most like notorious bad guys in the sport. Definitely an enforcer, rather undersized to be like sort of a goon that he was. Yeah. But he got away with it with sheer sort of like aggression.
Yeah.
He brings to mind, I think the last game you and I went to, Sean Avery was playing. Okay. And no one liked Sean Avery. And he was always agitating fights and trying to start shit. Mm-hmm. Again, not a huge guy. And what's funny is like what we're going to describe is we're going to give you the top 5 hockey fights of all time. Is what we're building up to here. And they're going to be in no particular order, but we want to give you a little bit of context for what this is and sort of why hockey fighting is the thing. And essentially, like, fighting has been a part of hockey pretty much since like the 19th century in Canada when the game was first like conceived. And you know, some people attribute it to the lack of rules at the time, or they even say the invention of the blue line, which forced everybody into a much more like compact space when they're on offense and defense.
That's the icing line?
Kind of, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or offsides.
Offsides.
So, like...
Is offsides and icing the same thing?
No.
Oh, okay.
So,
see, all I know about this, I know from that, like, Sega Genesis hockey game from, a long time ago.
NHL PA 93.
That's probably it.
Yeah,
You'd pass the puck, like, way, and it would just go icing, like, over and over again. I'd be like, I don't know what the fuck that is. And someone's like, it's like offsides. That's all I know.
Sure, yeah. So... by crossing that blue line, right?
Yeah.
So the ice is divided in 3 sections, right? Blue line, red line, blue line, right? And so once the puck crosses into the blue line, pretty much you have all 10 players plus a goalie in that short sort of like area in 1/3 of the ice. You don't have anybody hanging back, and so that just forces a lot of physical.
They're not allowed to?
Well, yeah. Well, if you're on defense, the offense is all on there. Should the puck get cleared, leave that zone, then everybody has to leave that zone before you can go back in. So you can't leave somebody hanging out by the goalie and then just pass to him and go one-on-one. So essentially acting like offsides. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so everybody so if it crossed that line, everybody has... Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's what leads you to have 10 guys in a relatively small space, you know, assuming you're playing dump and chase hockey, not, you know, give and go stuff.
Got it.
And so that just leads to a lot of bodies trying to jockey for position and obviously, you know, work for the puck in a small place. But anyways, that's sort of like led to more physical play in hockey in general. Then in 1922, the NHL introduced Rule 56, which formally regulated fighting, or officially known in the rulebook at that time as fisticuffs.
Oh, there was like rules about it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So
are they still are there still rules in the book?
Yes, there are rules about it.
Are they still called fisticuffs?
No, that's something new too. So like here in 22 they called it fisticuffs, and then now it's changed. They've removed fisticuffs and changed it to Rule 46.
Dude.
And
doesn't fisticuffs feel like they just fucking invented a cool word?
Yeah.
Like everyone was sitting around and they were like, what should we call... This is kind of off topic, but I had this the other night. My friend Miles came over. It was like my best friend. He's been in Europe for a while. And Jason, my roommate, we were just the three of us were here. And it was the strangest, like kind of funny, like I felt like it was so like old dudes at like a gentleman's club, not like a strip club, like a gentleman's club from the church. Like Miles came over and it was like the evening on Saturday, and we all just sat in a circle, and there was kind of a weird pause, and then we just started like conversing, and we just...
You guys had a salon?
Conversed. We had a total fucking salon, like conversed about the issues of the day, and we did kind of talk about politics and whatever, and then for a little while, and then Miles was like, all right, well, I gotta wrap it up. I'll see you guys. And like went home. Yeah. And it was this funny thing. There's a scene in Deadwood, like you ever watched that show on HBO?
Yeah.
Where like the three of them, there's this weird guy who runs the newspaper who like they're walking down the boardwalk together, and he's like, perhaps we could sort of formalize this group of us that we go walking together and give ourselves a name. This idea that like there was this time in history people were just like joining and making clubs. It was like a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And after the scene, it's like one of the funniest lines in the series is like everybody leaves him like kind of with a tone of like, I don't know about this guy. And he's just alone and there's a silence and he goes, the perambulators. And it's like I think about it all the time. And it feels like guys were sitting around being like, what should we call fight, like boxing, not a brawl, but like a brawl, but when you're, you know, having sort of a boxing match, but
it's an exchange of ideas via hands,
fists, and you're kind of engaged, locked together, perhaps the way one might be cuffed together.
Yeah, you're cuffed in mutual combat.
Fisticuffs. How do we feel about fisticuffs? It feels like it's just like, what do we call this? And one guy was like, they're engaged in fisticuffs. Anyway,
the fabulous 1920s voice.
Yeah, I just think that people were inventing words once. I mean, they still are. I guess on Twitter, we're still inventing like yeet and stuff, you know, all the time. So, but it's such a fucking perfect word.
Yeah, I feel like in the 20s, I feel like a lot of words were invented. Like,
it feels like some steampunk journalist who was like fisticuffs one day.
Yellow journalism, where they're just like, let me tell you something.
So good.
So anyways, that rule is fisticuffs is no longer in the official rule book.
What was the rule about it before or now, or what do they say about it?
Sure. So a couple things. Now it's Rule 46 in the NHL rule book, and the way they term it is essentially they give referees a lot of discretion for what can happen in the context of a fight. We'll actually jump down to etiquette.
Great.
As far as what's supposed to happen and how it's supposed to happen. And typically, so you're familiar with the concept of a goon or an enforcer, yes?
Right.
Okay. So these days, the role of a goon or enforcer is kind of been reduced largely in part because like roster spots are so hard to come by.
Yeah, they just need
don't
like good players.
They just need solid good players more than anything.
What
else.
position do they usually is an enforcer?
So that's usually a third or fourth line defenseman who's just a giant motherfucker who doesn't mind throwing down. Typically fourth liner is kind of like how it's termed. And like,
are there any goons who are like good players also?
Yes, but that's yes. And then it's sort of like you have some tough guys versus like straight up goons.
Got it.
Goon used to be like, that's our goon versus your goon. Now you just have like some tough guys who are like third line defensemen or second line.
Right.
Yeah.
Because then you have your like Wayne Gretzky would be like a finesse player. Like your MVP players are like the ones who are like your Ferraris, right?
Yeah, exactly. You want to protect them at all times.
Right. You don't want them going off road.
Right, exactly. You want to, they got to stay on the track at all times. And if someone tries to bump them off the track, you got to make sure that shit doesn't happen.
Right.
So, for example, enforcers only fight each other. That's kind of like one of the predominant things in fight etiquette.
Right.
It's like, hey, you're an enforcer, I'm an enforcer. Let's go, baby.
Is that why that fight we did a few weeks ago with the young kid and whatever like was frowned upon so much? Because that young kid's like not supposed to be.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
he's a finesse player, and that's why he made a horrible mistake about like
because he initiated.
He initiated, and the other guy, I can't remember his name, Ovechkin.
Yeah, I think so.
Was like kind of like, do you really want to do this?
Right.
And then took him up on his offer, and then obviously what happened knocked him the fuck out. But like. There's some rules here where like even Darren McCarty described fighters as being divided into heavyweights and light heavyweights, and that said that players in the former category end up dancing with guys who could end their career with a single punch. And so like it's like there's a mutual respect being like, hey, if we're two heavyweights going at it, like we understand what we're getting into, but if a guy who's half his size is like getting chippy with you, it's just like, dude, you really want to do this?
Yeah.
And it might not even be said, but it's like,
yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
And if you really want to go, you'll go.
Mass is such a real. I was thinking that watching some Thai fighters, some guy training for his Thai fight.
Yeah.
And some of those Thai trainers who are like just stocky, like really strong, and they're just so much base, and they're taking, even though they're like wearing pads, they just don't get tired out, and they'll just trip their guys, or they'll like throw kicks at the guy, and you just like, dude, you really like forget. Nah, you never forget when you're fighting. Just a big, strong person who knows how to fight is so integrally
size,
dangerous.
And strength matter, man. Yeah, of course. No matter their skill level, like. And trust me, even when I'm rolling jiu-jitsu and being on the smaller side of things, whenever I run into a guy who's over 250 pounds, I'm like, there's a chance I'm going to be more technically skilled than you. There's a chance.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter nearly as much if you're inside control and smashing the fuck out of me.
Yes, that's true.
I had a guy who was training with me at the gym who was trying to tell me that size and strength doesn't matter in Olympic weightlifting, and I told him to get the fuck out of my face. Like, he's like, look at the Chinese guys, look at their weightlifting team, and I was like, yes, okay,
yes.
To be fair, that guy is clean and jerking 400 pounds at roughly 160 pounds, and then you look at the heavyweights, and they're clean and jerking 600 pounds,
right?
And I'm like,
yeah. No,
it might not scale,
it definitely matters. It definitely, you can get very strong. You can do a lot, but it definitely matters. There's a reason why the guys who are doing the absolute highest numbers are all a certain size.
Yeah.
They just are.
It's just simple physics. So anyways, that's one of the many things as far as like understanding sort of the unwritten rules or the etiquette of the fight. And as far as, spontaneous fights breaking out, it's usually between like two opponents who usually don't fight.
Right.
You know, that's usually when it will happen, because like the whole thing is like, listen, we understand what we're getting into. And a lot of times it's premeditated too.
Yes.
Which is super interesting, where they're sort of like, hey, on the next face off, you want to go? And then it's like, yeah, okay. Like, and so the puck drops, they throw down their gloves, they throw down their sticks, and depending on, usually their helmet, I think their helmets and face shields have to come off.
That makes sense if you don't have gloves.
I have to double check that. I think that might be one of the older fights we have, because I think now everybody wears helmets and face shields.
Got it.
So to prevent...
That Ovechkin fight, they didn't though, right?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Because you can't fucking fight with a face shield on. Not with bare hands.
Yeah, it's usually like a half face shield.
Got it. For protect your eyes.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
So anyways, like that happens, and you know, there's a high degree of respect between enforcers, because it's like, hey, we both know what we're getting into. And often like you'll see a couple guys, especially enforcers, who will be like, hey, you want to go? And the guy's like, not today. Like I have an injury or something like that. And he's like, okay, cool. Like,
yeah,
you know, and it's just mutual respect.
What prompts it though?
I'm glad you asked that. We're going to jump around quite a bit.
Great.
So we'll come back to etiquette in a little bit, but like, let's talk about, you know, the reason why fights happen in the first place. And there's a lot of game related stuff that happens in, you know, that could lead to a hockey fight. Some of it is just retaliation that we've sort of talked about. It's like, hey, you've been checking my star player, or hey, you hurt my star player. There's also the concept of momentum in team sports, where it's like, you know, a game is definitely going one way or the other. And it's like, how do you switch that momentum? You know, especially if you're playing on home ice, it's like, I need to get the crowd into this game. Let's have a fight.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's a definite way to do
yeah.
it. You can potentially build momentum or disrupt your opponent's momentum. There's also just sheer intimidation, where if you're like, hey, we're the more physical team and they might be more skilled, well, let's let them know who's boss, and just to let them know that this is happening.
Gotta let them know what time it is.
Exactly. Another way is deterrence too, where if you fight early, it's sort of like, hey, if you're going to get, you know, if you're going to start checking our star players, we're going to have another fight.
Right.
So those are just some of the ways to just sort of like, you know, do it. But ultimately you're trying to protect your teammates for the most part, except if you're trying to bring, you know, a new level to the game.
And from the perspective of the refs, what like decides when they break it up or when they let it go?
Yeah. So refs have a lot of latitude. And if you watch any hockey fights, traditionally what happens is like they sort of, the lineman and the referee will sort of clear out. And especially if it's two guys who have mutually agreed to fight, they literally pick up the sticks and like move things so that they can fight and they're not picked up and used as a weapon. And basically once the fight goes to the ground in any capacity, it's over.
That's wrap. Yeah.
Sometimes they'll stop it if a guy goes down to his knees. Sometimes they'll let it go if a guy like goes down to his knees, but then fights back up. But
cool.
Yeah. And there's definitely a whole technique for refs stepping in to break up a fight, which is different than you would a regular like street fight.
Yeah.
Just because you're on skates, and it's usually a 2-man operation where it's like, all right, if somebody gets taken down to the ground, one guy will come behind the top player, and the other guy will move in to separate once his arms have been secured.
Right.
And there's a whole like subsection of how to break up hockey fights, which is super interesting. But the rules, they kind of give a lot of latitude to the referees. They're like, listen, this is a part of the sport. Figure it out. Everyone who fights right now in the NHL gets 5 for fighting. That's kind of like where the term came from.
Got it.
And then depending on who instigated the fight, depending on how far it escalates, as far as like, does it become a bench clearing brawl?
Yeah, what makes it a bench clearer?
So we'll get into that as well. But like what the NHL and a lot of the North American organizations have done to sort of limit that, because it's such a bad look for hockey, is that they've just imposed such severe penalties that it just makes it something that you don't want to do. For example, in college hockey, and again, this is based on my experience many years ago, it was so rare to see a fight in college hockey. Because you had a full fucking cage face mask, which made it very difficult to punch through.
Totally.
But you were immediately ejected from the game, and you got a 2-game suspension. So you really had to want to fucking fight.
Yeah.
Because you're gone for, you know, a long time. And so essentially the NHL has done the same thing too, where they've just imposed such severe penalties where if you come off the bench to join a fight.
Wow.
Immediate ejection, and then up to, a 10-game suspension.
Wow.
Something like that.
So that would have to be like a real personal fucked up thing.
Right.
That gets out of
Exactly.
hand.
Because ultimately you're hurting your team, you're hurting yourself
Right.
by doing that. It's the same thing why, there's not a lot of slashing to someone's head. Like occasionally, in rare instances, you'll see someone pick up their hockey stick and fucking clock somebody in the head.
That's assault with a deadly weapon.
You get a criminal charge.
Yeah, that's
assault with a
fucking
deadly
nuts.
weapon. That has happened a couple of times, and our buddy Marty McSorley has gotten popped for that. Ugh. Aggressive guy.
Yeah.
Aggressive guy.
That's just like seeing red insanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads to some insane fights because people are like, what the fuck are you doing? We have a gentleman's agreement about
isn't
what
part
we're
of the
doing.
game.
And you have to trust, you have a whole bunch of guys on blades walking around with sticks. Like, what prevents this from devolving into a fucking melee?
Right.
So
that's amazing.
So yeah, if that ever happens where someone slashes somebody like really deliberately, especially if they're not aware that they're involved in something like that, it's a huge suspension. Where it's like you'll see guys get suspended for the season or anything like that.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you're just like, well, it's we hope it doesn't happen, and if it does, you better really mean to do it because A, you're going to get arrested.
Yeah.
B, you're going to not play for a very long time, and I hope you understand that.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah. So the other thing too that I will mention, besides all those like team tactics, as far as like why you might start a fight or why a fight might break out, there's also the personal shit too.
Sure.
Which is just like
there's always that. That's in every sport.
Right.
I feel like.
Yeah.
I feel like even basketball. I feel like basketball is like a sport I'm not good at or not. I don't really know that much about, but I've sort of picked up that there's a way to be physical in sneaky ways. There's a way to like accidentally hit
throw
someone with an elbow.
elbows.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When you're going up for a rebound and you keep your elbows out.
Yeah, the way you
that
impose
sort
your
of
will
stuff.
on your space. That's people can be very physical players without breaking the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like once you actually start throwing punches, that's when you start getting technical fouls and unsportsmanlike conduct and getting ejected.
Yeah.
And especially in basketball where you only have so many star players, if your superstar gets ejected for that, it changes the tempo of the game completely.
Right.
Yeah. So anyways, I wanted to talk a little bit about tactics. And, many of these tactics are pretty basic. There's a straight go for it where you're just like, hey, I'm going to hold on to your collar and you're going to hold on to my collar. We're going to smash each other in the fucking head.
Yeah.
Which is obviously the most entertaining.
Yeah, rules. I mean, I still to this day, Happy Gilmore has great hockey fight tactics and normal everyday on the earth life. I've always thought that if your martial art can't answer hockey fighting, you're fucked. Like that's a very human instinct to grab you and shake you around and hit you with the other arm.
Impose your will with one arm. Essentially painting the target.
Yeah. And I think, especially when you aren't exposed to martial art, when you haven't done any fighting sports for real, even people who have done martial arts a long time, I'm surprised at how much... We did this women's self-defense seminar recently at my jiu-jitsu academy that I helped train a little bit at.
Shout out to Villains.
Yep. And it's this amazing thing where people go like, what would you do if someone did this? And like that question comes up all the time, and it doesn't matter what it is, but the answer to that, there's usually answers,
sure,
but they're not useful. Like the idea of learning how to fight from a perspective of question and answer, like A means B happens techniques, is very like Rex Kwon Do shit. It's very like grab my hand, grab my hand. Yeah. And it's hard to kind of figure out how to express this nuance when you're uneducated in it, because even in jiu-jitsu or wrestling or boxing, there will be answers. Like someone's like, if someone does this, what do you do? Well, you have answers. You've done it long enough that you're like, okay, well, if that comes in, maybe I'd slip to the outside and try to come over with my own left or whatever.
Yeah.
So you start to still think, well, isn't that the same thing? Isn't that like a answer response? But it's not really. It's like you have principles of fighting that you use. If you do wrestling or Thai boxing or jiu-jitsu. On the one hand, jiu-jitsu, yes, there's a million techniques about how your closed guard turns into a triangle, turns into an armbar. If they do this, you do this, that kind of a thing, and gambits and setups and all that stuff. But when you really do it, like, because people, what'll happen is someone will go, like, what do you do if, what would I do if you did that to me? And you go like, well, this. And they'd be like, well, what if I did this then? And what would you do? And at a certain point, usually 1 or 2 steps of like, what would you do if I did this? You go, well, then it's fighting. We're doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like that you are really ruled, and I think you get better faster fighting if you have like a set of principles that answer whatever situation that comes at you.
Yeah.
It's a more like realpolitik version, I guess, of that like Marine McMap thing about like any weapon, one mind. Like that, the idea is I have a goal and I gonna try to fucking win, and a bunch of principles around that, like involving like flanking and lines of fire and whatever, that apply to like any kind of fighting.
Sure.
And I feel like hockey fighting is one of those things that if you've only done like karate stuff or taekwondo, you're like Aikido, even I did Kung Fu. I remember I'd be like, what would I do? If someone just grabbed me, I couldn't, what the fuck do I do?
Yeah.
You know? And now, once you've done jiu-jitsu or something long enough, you're like, you just react. Like you kind of turn in, it depends where the hand is. It depends what I'm going to do with it. How hard is he keeping the grip? How stiff is he? How like that your just body reacts.
Yeah.
And so to me, hockey fighting is the greatest thing of being like, hockey fighting is like what happens when just actual human beings who are intelligent and athletic fight each other instinctively.
Right.
They just do the most realistic, the most useful. I'm going to grab you. I'm going to control you. I'm going to punch you. And it's amazing how many traditional martial arts like don't have an answer for that when you're really approached with speed and violence and intent.
Right.
That you're like, wait, slow down. What's my technique? You grab the wrong wrist.
Do I throw my jab first? What?
So I think hockey fighting really does have like some amazing.
Well, you know, I haven't trained with the gi much, and it was like the learning curve is super steep. Once, you know, your opponent grabs your lapel.
Yeah.
What do? Like now, my first instinct, the minute my opponent grabs my lapel, I immediately grab back. And it's just like, you know, like I don't have anything to think about. But also it's the same thing too in hockey too, where it's like if somebody grabs the collar of my jersey, of my hockey sweater, I know what's coming next. Giant overhand right, more than likely.
Right.
So it's sort of just like, what do? Grab their jersey, tuck your chin, and get ready to start throwing bombs.
Right.
You know?
Like, because that one hand that's grabbing you ends up being weirdly safe. Because, you know, if that hand's busy grabbing me, it can't be punching me.
Exactly.
So
I only have to worry about one
That's
thing.
right.
Yeah.
That's been a thing I've been thinking about a lot myself with jiu-jitsu and grip stuff. I mean, it's funny to be this far into jiu-jitsu and still have like these dumb aha moments. If you're brand new to jiu-jitsu, I would say like pay attention to grips right away from the beginning and understand
this
a lot.
This is for gi.
Yeah. No, but no gi too. Like the way people, if I get a good 2-on-1, if I like, that's the setup for your attacks, your defenses is all coming from your fucking grips first.
Yeah.
And if somebody, feel a wrestler who gets a good 2-on-1 on you, or like gets they're underhooked the way they like you, like you're fucked. Like if they really get it. So I really think more than ever now, I used to kind of just like wait and see what happens. I still kind of like wait and see what happens to play jiu-jitsu just for fun. But if you're really being serious, this thing they always say, be first. Like if somebody gets a grip on you that they like, you're in trouble. Because
they're dictating the pace of the fight.
I mean, literally, it made me feel so good that one of my like guys at the same level at me who coaches some of the classes, sometimes he feels when we do gi, he just goes and pulls guard after I get a certain grip. He's like, oh, fuck that. I don't want to get tossed. I don't want to go for a ride right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, made me feel good because I was like, oh, good. Your grips should be threatening enough that someone goes, you feel it when somebody gets the grip on you and you're like, he's got the better grip. I'm fucked. I better move to the next thing because I'm going to go for a ride. If I keep trying to fight from here, he's got the better grip, the better position.
Right.
So like fighting, like the first thing now is as soon as a grip comes that you don't like, you have to break it immediately. And if you can't break it immediately, you got to figure out, well, he's committed to that grip. I guess I've got to work with it and act like that's something I wanted. What if that was something I wanted? What would I do?
Yeah.
Or whatever. You just start dealing with it differently. But that really, truly, that is like the first point of contact that kind of dictates the momentum of what's going to happen next is like, how good is that first grip that someone gets on you?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, for me, it dictates where the fight's going and who's imposing their game plan, who's imposing their will.
Which speaking of is part of the point. Like for you, what you should be doing is like, have a game plan. Know like what grip do I want, and if I get it, when I get
what am I doing?
What am I doing next?
Right.
That I'm not just doing it to be like, well, let's see what happens. It's like, which is what happens when you start jiu-jitsu, where you just get dropped in and you're kind of like, wait, what the fuck am I doing? What are we doing?
Yeah.
And that, you know, wears off over time. But as soon as you can sort of have a clear path, if you just have a clear vision of what you want to do, I mean, it translates to real life, I think, too. You'd be amazed with that visualization and that knowledge and that game plan, how far it'll get you.
Sure.
We
always poke fun at a lot of like, hey, I manifested this, the secret that, but it's like, no, seriously.
Yeah.
Like, I see how this is going to end, and I'm doing everything that I can to advance my position of my body to get to that.
Yeah, I always
because
think
I know what I want.
That magical thinking kind of thing is like, yes, it's got a little bit of a selection bias because you're hearing that it worked out for people who did that because, of course. It's like, do you know what I'm saying? It's like if something worked out for you, it's very unlikely that it happened just by accident. Right. Sometimes it does. Some people have charmed lives and things just happen. But probably if somebody succeeded at something that they wanted, they thought about it. They thought about it all the time. They created a plan about what they'd have to do to get there. And that, like, oh, what do you know? Magically, a thing happens. Really, you just made a plan and followed through the steps and it happened. So it's like, yes.
And then maybe some good shit happened to you along the way.
Right. It picks up its own momentum.
Right. But you still had to put yourself in a position to succeed.
Yeah. So this idea that like everyone who's ever succeeded, they magically made it happen. Magically? They had a plan.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some selection bias there. Have a plan. Don't just sit around waiting for a thing to happen. And that's like definitely true in fighting, where like moment to moment is like, you know, so violent and crazy and fast, and moments pass like in the blink of an eye. Have a plan. If you have intention and a plan and focus and aggression, like that will win you a lot of fights.
Sure.
if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, that also brings us to our second tactic, which is Gordie Howe's rope-a-dope, where essentially...
what was the first one? The first tactic is just grab the shirt and punch.
It's called go for it. You want to go for it? Like
that's fucking so good.
It's super Canadian and super hockey, where essentially like, hey, I'm going to give for as good as I get.
Got it.
And just go.
Just trade.
And usually, you're essentially just trading. And again, that's not probably the best thing for head trauma or anything else. But like if you see two guys who are circling each other, you know, they're doing one of two things. One, they might try and throw their power hand from range, potentially fight-ending thing, or they're using their lead hand to essentially paint the target and get somebody within range and close the distance.
Yeah.
And that at that point, that allows both people to go for it.
It also makes me think of like in Thai boxing when they do those like kind of like in the Irish whips and stuff that you do in pro wrestling. Like when you Thai box somebody, you kind of like step and whip them. Mm-hmm. So you're just using it to keep them off base. Like they're dealing with getting their balance back while you're setting up your next shot.
You're already throwing a knee like, while they're trying to reestablish their base.
Yeah. Which I assume, like, I mean, I know these guys like live on their skates and most of them playing hockey since they were a kid. But to me, that would be the biggest, like if I was in there, no matter how much fucking time I've spent grappling, that I might feel confident if somebody grabbed my collar that I wouldn't just get totally thrown all over the place. You add in like ice and these blades that I personally don't use ever, and that's a whole nother crazy skill set.
Sure. Yeah. And that's definitely part of it too, is like understanding the dynamics of how speed changes and how shifting of weight changes. In hockey fighting. And so like that's actually what makes Gordie Howe's tactic of essentially rope-a-doping a guy so one of the things too in hockey,
how's he rope-a-doping?
So we'll back up just a little bit. Is in hockey, line changes and shifts are relatively short. It's a 90-second-ish sprint. You know, you're going balls to the wall as hard as you can for roughly about 90 seconds before the line change comes in and a new set of guys comes onto the ice.
Got it.
Right? So these guys are in terrific shape. Some people argue as good as, if not better, than MMA guys because it's a lot of like super intense, short muscle, what is it?
Anaerobic, explosive
work followed by like a period of rest. And so the same principle sort of applies to a fight where it's sort of just like, you know, what Gordie Howe did is he would just hold the hockey sweater of the guy he was fighting. He would immediately establish that and just take a defensive position around sort of like the armpit of the punching arm. So it sort of impedes the movement of the guy who's doing it.
Underneath, like an underhooky?
Yeah, sort of underhooky, but like taking this part right here.
Interesting.
On the power hand, the punching hand, right?
The armpit sort of sleeve.
Yeah. So essentially he would do that, and a guy would try to like move out of it and throw hands over it, and it would essentially tire himself out after the first minute. And at that point, once they showed signs of tiring, he would take over and usually beat the fuck out of somebody because he's just like, have you been wrestling yourself for a minute? Like, stop punching yourself. Stop punching yourself.
That's amazing.
And just big brother the fuck out of him at that point. So, like, that's a little bit more of a thinking man's fighter.
Yeah, especially when you don't have a huge window. You're kind of like letting them flop around like on the line for a minute there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's definitely a thing. And obviously that's more of a controlled situation where it's like, hey, do you want to go? As opposed to you just slash my star player and I don't have the like, I'm not, you know,
I see.
I don't have red in my eyes and I'm just going to fucking murder you. Because I doubt that thought really comes into play when you're like, I need to, you know, kill somebody. Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of some of the tactics involved too. And I just wanted to touch on a couple more things. I know we've gone a little long as far as like all the things that make hockey fighting fun and interesting. But I also want to talk about the whole idea of fighting simply, of fighting fairly and cleanly. And like the whole idea of fairness in hockey is like, okay, so we're not going to wear equipment that that can injure the opposing fighter. So it's like face shields, gloves, masks, and like we're not assaulting the referees, we're not assaulting the linemen, like, you know, and we don't start fights based off of a good score. So if it's just like, hey, you got a goal on me, that doesn't mean I'm going to go start a fight. Like, you know, it's sort of like, wait, why would you do that? Like, how dare you? So it's only like as a retribution or a way of regulating foul play is sort of the way it generally works. Anyways, with all that in mind, we talked about tactics, we talked about etiquette, we talked about the causes of fights, and we talked a little bit about just hockey fighting in general and kind of the rules. I now want to present to you the top 5 hockey fights of all time.
Love it.
In no particular order. Starting with our good friend, Marty McSorley and Wendell Clark. So a little bit of context. So Kings were in town for and visiting the Maple Leafs in Game 1 of the finals of the Campbell Conference in Toronto. And Toronto was well on their way to getting a win. And Doug Gilmour harmlessly skating across the ice when Kings enforcer Marty McSorley, our good friend, drops him in what many consider a dirty hit. And with that, you can now watch the fight.
So that was the hit. That was
the hit right there. Now they're going for it.
Jesus. Dude, this is a brawl.
Yep. Now, see, trainers are already on the ice at this point, tending to Gilmour.
Dude, their shirts are coming off.
Yeah,
I mean,
hockey sweaters are off. And McSorley kind of rabbit punching him a little bit. Hey, but you see how they broke up the fight right there? The 2-on-1? Now
they're still
at this point,
like
Gilmour is drawing at the Kings bench right now, as is a couple other guys. They're like, and they're just kind of letting him know what for.
Wait, is that McSorley who's got his shirt all off and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Dude. It's fucking bullshit. You can see him.
Yeah.
Yell at the ref. Dude, there's just like gloves and sticks everywhere.
Yep. And you see what they do here is like the minute the fight's over, they'll either like, so they ejected him pretty much right away without even consulting any of the other refs. But like one of the way they neutralize fights is like they take him to a neutral zone and take him to the penalty box right away to sort of like prevent any further escalation. But here you go. Here's the replay.
Ooh, is that a legal hit? Ooh, god damn.
May have been a cross check. Yeah.
Is over here to your left, and you'll see him come into the picture
Oh, so they're saying McSorley hit the guy. Check the guy?
Yeah, so the reason why that fight even took place is because Gilmore is a skill player, and McSorley went in and went for what's probably a dirty hit.
Got it.
Now, again, if you talk inside hockey, it's sort of like you can't just drop a pass the minute you cross the blue line and try to penetrate into the neutral zone. I'm sorry, into the zone, and expect to not get roughed up a little bit.
Damn.
But again, it looked like McSorley threw an elbow or cross-checked him, So again, it's just one of those things that happens against a skill player when you have a fucking goon like McSorley on your team.
Cool.
So, anyways, that's one of our top 5 fights, and again, I'm not here to just beat up on Marty McSorley, but he's one of the most hated people.
So fucking crazy.
So, all right, moving on to our second fight, Flyers versus Canadiens. You'll notice that there's not individual players mentioned in this fight. Right? It's more of a team thing happening here. So this was the case on May 14th of 1987 in Game 6 of the Wales Conference Finals when the Flyers invaded Montreal and they were ready to dance. Okay? Here is...
Canadians are such nice people. It's so weird that this is part of them too.
Oh, wow. All right. So let me give a little bit more context. This video picks up right in the middle of the fight. This fight actually happened before the match, and so essentially the Flyers were told not to shoot the puck into the empty net during warmups, and notorious tough guy Claude Lemieux did it anyways, and for some reason this infraction set off the brawl. This is pretty much like a bench clearing brawl here, and it actually led to the rule that we discussed earlier about the warm-up brawl. Essentially, the penalties got so severe, the NHL was just like, this is such a bad look for us that we're going to change the rules to prevent this from ever happening again. But let's pick it up in the 1987 fight between the Flyers and the Canadiens in what is known as the pregame brawl.
Love it. Just go for like a single like that, guy.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise. So the other guy's like the other goal is like trying to keep the other guy out of the fight.
Yeah.
They're on the ground now. They're like on the ice.
Yeah. I don't think the officials had even skated onto the ice at this point. Now they're like, oh shit.
Oh, but more players are out here now too.
Yeah, being like, hey, what the fuck's happening? Half of these guys aren't even dressed.
This is so weird.
Yeah.
Like they're all just chilling and like more people are showing up, but no one's like really fighting more yet. Oh wait, they're starting to scrum up a little bit.
Yeah.
Jawing. Is that like a phrase they use in hockey a lot?
Yeah, it's kind of Canadian as far as...
It is.
Kind of like how chippy is kind of like a like a soccer sort of word. But here we go.
Dude.
A new contender with just his... doesn't even have his sweater on. You want to go, eh?
Dude, yeah, this is crazy. He just came out for like he's going after this guy.
Yeah.
Dude, the way they skate is amazing.
Yeah. See? And now things escalate because he was going after one of their skill players, and you just can't do that. I mean, what? He was probably a foot taller than the guy?
Yeah, that guy was definitely outsized him.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell is going on? Oh, if you're the announcers, like, how the fuck are you even dealing with this? This is so weird. That's very impressive.
Yeah. And it's just like they're in a shark pile. Like they're just like stuck there. And like at a certain point, everybody pairs off and they're just sort of like, hey, are we going or not? Like, just trying to figure it all out. Like, even these guys in the corner right here are just sort of like, hey, like just so you know, like I have a hand on you in case this escalates, but like,
It's like if you watch in the background of Braveheart battle scenes near the end of them, sometimes some of the guys on the opposite sides are just kind of like, hey, kind of like miming the swords a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, we still filming right now? Or like, are we supposed to go? Or...
Yeah. Now, obviously, there are still some guys at the center of the scrum that are like going for it. Otherwise, this shit wouldn't be like happening.
Right, but they're just keeping them.
Right, and they're trying to peel guys off, being like, fucking relax already, like, you know. So. Oh, now we're pairing off again. Are we escalating? We're having words.
They do seem kind of all paired off. Like they all have somebody trying to figure out, like, are we going to have a fight?
Right. And so, like, in case it erupts again, it's sort of like that's sort of the etiquette. You really don't want to have.
They're going for it. That's getting explosive again.
Yeah. This poor cameraman is just not sure where to go. Like, you know, you'll see some uppercuts thrown here, like, but mostly a lot of like dirty boxing and a lot of like essentially pummeling at this point. So occasionally you get a shot thrown, but yeah, this warm-up brawl was definitely one of the more interesting fights in all of hockey. Fight number 3, Colorado Avalanche versus the Detroit Red Wings, also known as Bloody Wednesday.
Cool.
For some, this was the brawl that defined an era. This is March 26, 1997. Detroit Red Wings and Colorado Avalanche reached the boiling point of one of the greatest rivalries in all of hockey. And like all great feuds, this one began in the playoffs the year prior. So again, one of the other things too, I will say, is that hockey players have a long-term memory.
Yeah.
So like if something happens in a previous game, they have no problem waiting until the next time they face them in a series or a year later to retaliate. A year earlier, there had been our good friend Claude Lemieux had punched Detroit's Slava Kozlov straight in the jaw for an earlier hit in the series. But unfortunately, Lemieux was not done there. All right. 3 games later, he delivered one of the dirtiest hits in all of hockey to Chris Draper, and he drilled the Detroit skater from behind into the boards.
Yikes.
Draper suffered a broken jaw, cheekbone, nose, and that hit alone earned Lemieux a 2-game suspension.
Oh, my God.
And this all happened the previous year. And that kind of brings us to what's about to happen right now with the Colorado Avalanche versus the Detroit Red Wings.
Oh, yeah, you see him doing that thing you're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, where he's hanging onto the sleeves and keeping him tied up all weird.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nice
dude,
judo.
that is really judo shit, dude.
Yep. Yep. All about body control right there. And he got dominated, but
Was this like later in the game, or is this like just moments later?
this is moments later.
6'6", 230 pounds plus. He is a giant. And Corbet, who got cranked up by Aaron Ward back in Denver.
Oh, dude.
Did he pull guard?
But the linesmen are right on top of that one early, so
The other thing, if you don't have a helmet, you hit that ice, that'd be pretty nasty and bounce your head off that. Dude, this thing just keeps going.
And you'll see like all these guys get ushered off, right? Again, but that doesn't start later on in the game. So,
Get into it again, huh? Dude,
Yeah.
are those the same guys? Or is it
No,
just like the teams are just fighting now?
the teams at this point.
it is an off end. That we see
Dude.
nobody did, and now Darren McCarty gets his shots in at
Oh.
Look who came over. Vernon and Waugh. Mike Vernon with a great left. Follows up with the right.
Dude. Jesus.
There we go. 3 good shots.
He was hammered by Darren McCarty, and he is being helped into the locker room.
Those are goalies?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
The goalies are going at it?
Yeah. You'll see a lot of some good goalie on goalie fights.
Two of the best of all time. Known for the use of the pillows.
Wild.
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, long memories.
Long memories like a fucking elephant. Patrick Waugh, one of the greatest hockey goalies of all time, went for it against Vernon and got cut up pretty good.
Yikes.
Now this Detroit crowd is loving this, of course.
Darren McCarty said hockey players have long memories. The best time to seek, if you will, revenge. To seek redemption is maybe when your opponent least expects it.
not bad advice
Jesus.
in the art of war. I believe the rest of this is all just like highlights and
yeah. It's like 15-minute long.
Yeah, this is a 15-minute long clip. And so anyways, that was one of the bigger ones. And this is one of the best brawls of all time.
Yeah, that definitely
we'll
seems...
try and include that in the show notes so you can watch all 15 minutes of it. We have one more team fight, Bruins and Rangers from 1979. And this is just 2 days before Christmas. And at the tail end of the game, the Bruins take a run at the Rangers and absolutely steamroll one of their players, Ulf Nilsson. And now, again, for context, the hit was revenge for an earlier sucker punch that Nilsson had dished out earlier in the game.
It's like a very soap opera quality to these.
Oh, it's great. But you're about to see something that I don't think has happened since 1979. Now, this is pre the helmet rule, so you'll see a lot of guys here on the ice without helmets and face masks.
I don't know what the temper is frayed. Nobody's thrown a punch, but instead of going to the dressing room, they're milling around. The only one who's gone to the dressing room is Phil Esposito. After Bork had it, went for the empty net, blocked by Greshner. Somehow they fed Esposito from the blue line in, all alone, and Cheevers, what a stop.
Yeah, so at this point, we just have a lot of milling around and being like, okay, all right, we're not happy with the way this game ended, but here we go.
Oh my God, dude. He just climbed up over the fucking glass and he's fighting just fans, just people. Jesus.
So what touched that off is one of the fans grabbed a stick and hit one of the Bruins.
Oh my God, dude. They're like getting up in there.
Yeah. 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 And right now he's beating the guy with his own shoe. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
This feels this is very slap shot.
Yeah,
feeling.
This is definitely 1970s hockey, but and what's funny too is like the rest of who is it? Is it the Islanders? Damn it. The Rangers are just pretty much standing around being like, "Hey, what happened?" But they're not fighting the Boston Bruins right now. Most of the Bruins are in the stands at this point. And but I mean, it's just so crazy that a fan would grab a hockey stick and hit a player
that is
on
insane.
the ice or on the bench. And like, that's just an insane proposition. Anyways, so that's one of the crazier things. This clip goes on for a little bit.
Up into the fucking stands. It's crazy.
Up into the stands. Obviously,
fighting the fans.
Yeah, that's happened in the NBA a couple times, like when Meta World Peace went up there. So anyways, that's the hockey version of that. And now our last fight, Dave Schultz versus Tiger Williams. Now, to give you a little bit of context, at this point in the NHL, Williams had led the NHL in most penalty minutes in a career at an astounding 4,421.
Oh my God.
and was in an estimated 234 fights over the course of his career.
Holy shit.
So context for this fight, Toronto's Tiger Williams had slashed Philadelphia's captain Bobby Clark, and that didn't sit well with Dave Schultz.
He's the guy with the 4,000 minutes. Schultz.
Williams was.
Oh, William. Okay.
Yeah. All of that was the minutes and the fights was all Williams.
Yes.
So he slashes the captain of the
of
the other team. Dave Schultz is like, I had a pretty impressive record because I had the most penalty minutes in a single season.
Oh my God.
With 472. And this is how these guys go at it at this point.
There's a couple fights going on. That's the big one, though.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So he's pressing him up against the wall right now. Couple fights going on. Yeah.
Dude.
Oh, big overhand right to the back of the head. 3 punches on that quote-unquote side fight. Meanwhile, Williams and Schultz are going at it in the corner up against the glass. Not a great slot. Not a great look up against the glass. Prevents movement, prevents head movement.
Oof.
And Dave Schultz is giving him four up against there.
Good.
Yep.
Some fingers fucking getting in the eyes in that one.
A little bit of talking, a little bit of jawing going on. Good uppercut, right? Yeah.
Whew.
Oh, are we trying to pull the sweater over the top? Or no, we're wrapping his gi around to try to prevent movement, essentially.
I know. Yeah, it's very judo-y. It's very jiu-jitsu-y. There's so much use of that cloth.
Yeah.
Ooh, those hands are like scratching at the face a little bit there, too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guarantee you they're talking where he's like, oh, we're doing some hair stuff?
Stuff, looking for that collar. Wow.
Yeah. And, essentially he's talking to him being like, hey, if you're going to slash our one of our guys, you're going to pay the price.
Yeah. I mean, it is funny. Like, it's like, hockey has this, soccer has the thing that's like legendarily like, you fake stuff or you take a tiny thing and you go like, oh, it's kind of funny. There is a kind of hold me back quality to some of the thing too. Like, yes, there's this brawl and it's mean between a couple guys, but it's interesting to see like everyone else on the team has to like,
you immediately pair up.
He has to be like, oh, I'm in fight two. I'm in fight two. In case anybody's worried, I would be in it. We just gotta
Yeah.
But they're kind of like, okay.
My favorite though is just when things have escalated so much that the goalies fight. Like that's just one of my favorite. That's
insane. The idea that the
favorite
two
looks
from both sides of the fucking That's so funny.
Anyways, that is our show and tell segment on hockey fights. And I think we learned just a little bit about.
I definitely did learn a lot about like the context and like what's allowed and how it gets in and stuff. It's pretty crazy.
No, it's definitely crazy. I mean, the good news is, depending on your outlook, is like the overall trend is there has been a significant decrease in hockey fights.
That's cool.
Especially like over time. It kind of peaked during like 60s and 70s. And then like they have a metric on like hockeyfights.com where they talk about number of fights per game. And it's just significantly declined. Yeah. And during the lockout of 2008, where there wasn't any hockey, the Players Association and the NHL couldn't come to an agreement. So there was no hockey, hence the lockout.
Got it.
That led to an agreement where they made some rule changes that didn't necessarily penalize fighting, but it made the sport a lot faster and a lot more finesse oriented and led to a lot more scoring. So the role of the goon got reduced significantly because it's like, dude, we need all the skilled players we can get.
Because that's the thing that makes people tune in more or less to a sport. I feel like is the scoring, a lot of it.
Sure.
Like, do you score a lot in a game?
Absolutely.
I think it's like a hard sell. Soccer's always been a hard sell to Americans, and I think hockey too, because it's such a low scoring game compared to like basketball regularly over 100 points.
Sure. Absolutely. Same. You could say the same thing about baseball too, where it's like,
yes.
Yeah. So anyways, that's sort of the overall trend as far as the sport goes and how fighting within it.
Like that's smart. I was going to ask, like, do the owners, do the commissioners, like, secretly or not, like, do they prefer fighting or not?
So there have been a couple efforts to ban fighting in hockey over time, and they've all been defeated.
Yeah.
They've all been defeated because to some degree it's still serves a purpose.
Yeah.
And also from a marketing point of view, like you can occasionally get some new
the identity
fans.
of hockey. The guy like missing a tooth.
Yeah.
You know, sort of cheery, missing a tooth, ruddy faced.
Yeah.
Maniacs.
Exactly. So, anyways, that is our show and tell.
Dope. Love it. Thank you.
There you go. This has been another episode of Fight Stuff.
Yeah, check us out at Fight Stuff Podcast on Instagram. You can email us at fightstuffpodcast@gmail.com if you want to send us any clips or things you'd like us to talk about.
Yeah, we appreciate all the kind words that people have been messaging us and sending us. I even got one on LinkedIn recently about hockey fights.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
So you never know where those comments and those words of praise are coming from these days.
Follow you where?
You can follow me on Instagram, Zeke Thomas is rad, or ZekeThomas.com for all your Zeke Thomas needs.
Yeah,
Jared, how about yourself?
Follow me at Jarrett Sleeper, Jarrett_Sleeper, JRETT_SLEEPER. Also check out my mental health podcast if you want, My Good Bad Brain.
Great podcast. I highly recommend you check it out.
And that's, I think we're good.
Yeah.
See you next time, fight fans.
Till next time.
Fight Stuff is executive produced, hosted, and edited by Jarrett Sleeper and me, Zeke Rodrigues Thomas for Mind Jam Media. Our theme song is by Jason Scardamalia.